This is the X-Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
This is A Different Perspective with Kevin Randle. A retired U.S. Lieutenant Colonel, Kevin Randle has been studying UFOs for nearly 50 years. Kevin has investigated some of the most famous UFO cases in the world and has been consulted for dozens of documentaries about UFOs. Considered one of the leading experts into the Roswell UFO crash of 1947, Kevin has written more than 25 books about UFOs, including the recently published Roswell in the 21st Century. Now, here's the host of A Different Perspective, Kevin Randle.
And as promised, we are back from our 167-hour hiatus. This is truly A Different Perspective, and I really am Kevin Randle. We are joined today by David Halperin. In the 1960s, David Halperin was a teenage ufologist. He grew up to become a professor of religious studies. His specialty, religious traditions of heavenly ascent and otherworldly journeys. He taught history of Judaism at the University of Northern Carolina at Chapel Hill from 1976 through 2000. He's published 5 books and numerous articles on Jewish mysticism and messianism, and 1 novel, Journal of a UFO Investigator, which draws on his teenage dreams and fantasies, as well as the UFO scene of the early 1960s. The novel was published in 2011 by Viking Press and has been translated into Spanish, Italian, and German. David has a blog at www.davidhalperin.net, where he posts bi-weekly on UFOs, religion, and other subjects dear to his heart. He's working on a second novel and on a non-fiction book, Intimate Alien, The Hidden Story of UFOs, in which he explores what UFOs once meant to him and what they mean for us and our culture. He lives in North Carolina with his wife, Rose. David Halperin, welcome to A Different Perspective.
I'm delighted to be here, Kevin.
I'm going to take a moment here and explain how this all came about. I've been working on a book for a publisher, and I was looking at other UFO landings, and Glassboro was one that came to mind. And the reason it came to mind is back in 1976, when the Project Blue Book files were declassified and sent to Maxwell Air Force Base, to the Air Force Archives, I had an opportunity to go through them. A friend of mine, Bob Cornett, and I went through the big index, and we wrote down every unidentified case. We wrote down the cases that were of photographic interest and those with physical evidence, because we thought those were interested. We kept the names so we could put the names back in after they were all redacted by the Air Force. One of the things we looked at, and it was a thick file, was the Glassboro UFO landing. So as I was doing research on that, I looked that up on the internet, and I came across your name and your website and sent you an email. Now, with all that background, and remembering we don't have a lot of time right now, we'll have to take a break shortly, Glassboro, I believe you investigated it personally. You talked to the witnesses. What did you learn?
What I learned eventually is that there was no UFO there. It was a hoax. A student from Glassboro State College had dug a hole, dug a few smaller holes, sprinkled some chemicals in the hole, set a fire, broke a limb of a sassafras tree, and then he and a friend found 2 small boys who were fishing. This was on Saturday afternoon, September 4th, 1964, and told them that he had seen a glowing red object land. The boys told their father, who reported it to the police. The news spread amazingly. I have clippings from all sorts of newspapers from New Jersey, Pennsylvania. WOR announced it on its morning news. I went down there the following Saturday. I was 16 years old. I had procured a letter from a friend of mine who worked at a radio station saying I was a representative of the station, which was completely false. And I went into the police station, was welcomed very warmly. They actually drove me out to the landing site, and I examined and photographed the holes, met a very nice family who took me home for dinner, and who put me in touch with the father of the two boys, with whom I remained in contact for some months.
You mean the young boys who reported it to their fathers or told their fathers, as opposed to the guys who created the hoax?
Exactly. The guys who created the hoax had vanished, and
Okay.
they only surfaced the following January, or one of them did, when he tried to sell the story to a Pennsylvania magazine, Philadelphia magazine.
Well, let me break in here.
Sure.
In here. We'll get back to this right after the break, but we have to take a break here quickly. If you have a chance, take a look at www.kevinrandle.blogspot.com, and we will return momentarily.
Hi everyone, Rob McConnell here, and I wanted to spend a moment on internet streaming. Everybody has heard about internet streaming, but not many know much about it. Did you know the internet streams just about everything?
Movies,
From new releases to old classics.
TV shows,
Almost every show, every episode, and much more. But the question has always been, how do you do it? Well now, thanks to the folks at 123 Ready TV, I have the answer for you. They have developed a simple program app, 123 Ready TV, that you install on your Windows PC, Android smartphone, or Android tablet that can have you streaming like a pro in less than 5 minutes. You truly won't believe how much is available or how easy it is to do until you try. And for a one-time cost of only $19.99, this product is a real winner. To learn more about 123 Ready TV, visit our website at www.xzbn.net.
This is the X-Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
How would you like to be able to read other people's minds? Well, the next best thing is here. When you know how to read a person's name, you know how the person thinks, feels, and behaves. Each letter in our name holds a key to unlock our true essence. Our name contains both our gifts and challenges in this lifetime. Mnemology science discovers personality secrets hidden in the placement of the letters of our names, including the first and last impression people remember about us. Sharon shows us how to interpret the arrangement of letters as outlined in her book, Know the Name, Know the Person. Sharon Lynn Wyeth created mnemology science after 18 years of research and testing her theories, and has supported thousands of people around the world in understanding themselves and others better. You'll enjoy Sharon's unique teachings as she shares her system to learn the gifts behind your given birth name. Even if you don't like your birth name, there are jewels in this book. If you're thinking of changing your name, ready to name your child, or wanting to get along better with others, this is the book for you. If you'd like to improve your relationships and change your life for the better, get the book today, Know the Name, Know the Person, or visit www.knowthename.com. That's www.knowthename.com.
Take a step back in time and discover old Florida cuisine at Marsh Landing Restaurant in Fellsmere, Florida. Enjoy delicacies such as frog legs, gator tail, catfish, and swamp cabbage, or enjoy the more traditional cuisine such as hand-cut Angus steaks, ribs, and seafood. Join us for breakfast with a southern flair featuring sweet potato pancakes, biscuits and gravy, and much more. Planning a party? Marsh Landing's private dining rooms can accommodate groups from 8 to 80 people. While you visit, enjoy the historic pictures, artifacts, and stories that line the walls. Marsh Landing is truly a unique experience. Marsh Landing Restaurant, 44 North Broadway in historic downtown Fellsmere, or visit marshlandingrestaurant.com. Marsh Landing, old Florida cuisine at its best.
And as I promised, we are back with the naked truth. I mean, a different perspective. Don't want to confuse you people out there. When we left, we were talking to David Halperin about the Glassboro, New Jersey UFO landing in September of 1964. And he had just mentioned to us that one of the fellows surfaced. It disappeared in September, but he had resurfaced in 1965 and trying to sell the story. And the truth is about to come out. So, David, take it from the point where our friend surfaced.
And the truth is, it was very, very sad truth for me, because I was working on a monograph that this was going to be my UFO landing. But the sad truth was that he had been arrested for creating a nuisance, that he had tried to sell the story of how he'd hoaxed the landing, and somehow the word got to the police. NICAP had a NICAP investigator had come. I don't know if your audience remembers the National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomena.
We have mentioned it. We have mentioned it several times in the course of the program. So some of them are aware of NICAP. It was based in Washington, D.C. It was led for a time by Don Kehoe, and eventually in the late 1970s, early 1980s, it kind of faded into oblivion. So you had a NICAP investigator show up, and he
was convinced it was real, that the Air Force had said it was a hoax. There was a couple of Air Force people came from McGuire Air Force Base in New Jersey. They said it was a hoax. The NICAP investigator called that absurd. And so I have to say I was in good company.
Well, nobody blames you for thinking it's a hoax. And I remember as I began UFO investigations as a teenager myself, it suddenly dawned on me after a few years that every case I was investigating turned out to be an unidentified. And I thought, I'm doing something wrong, because they can't all be unidentified. And I went back and was able to identify some of them. And the other thing I wanted to say about the Glassboro case, I have seen a picture of what is a number of New Jersey state policemen crouching by that hole, looking down into it, published in a number of publications. I'm sure you're aware of that photograph.
I don't know that photograph, no. But, I mean, I'm not in the slightest surprise. The police were quite sold on it, and they gave me a diagram, which I scanned, and I put it in my post on Glassboro, where the holes are made into a really symmetrical triangle. And it's only if you look at the measurements they give that you realize that the diagram is all wrong, that the holes weren't symmetrical at all. And I think they were just so convinced that there was really a vehicle that was sitting on top of the ground that distorted their perceptions.
Did the young boys, the young fishermen, who were told that the guy had seen the thing land, did their story evolve into the idea that they had maybe seen it too, or were they just saying, these guys told us that it landed there, and here is the remains?
Right. No, they never claimed to have seen it. They just reported what they had been told. And I don't think anybody's questioned that the little boys were telling the truth.
Well, yeah. I was just making sure that their story hadn't expanded.
No,
so
never.
There was probably a chemical analysis done on the stuff they threw in the hold. Was it anything interesting? Was it radioactive?
Supposedly they use chemicals to make it seem radioactive. I don't know how effective that was. They used, let me see what they said, sulfur, potassium, and radium dioxide. I guess that would make it seem radioactive.
Well, I remember in the 1960s, you could buy radium paint. And I had a model of the submarine sea view from the old journey to the bottom of the sea, voyage to the bottom of the sea. And I'd bought some radium paint so I could paint the forward windows and stuff with the radium paint so it would glow in the dark. So I guess that would be slightly radioactive, I suppose.
I imagine so. But I'll tell you what I think is the really interesting thing about this. That when I put up the blog post, I simply assumed that everybody in the world had forgotten about it, that I was the only human being on the planet who remembered Glassboro. But then I got an email from a lady who was living in Glassboro at the time, and she wrote about how the Air Force had come to town on September 5th. She says, that was her birthday. She says, I remember that day like it was yesterday. Our street was closed. The Air Force was here. They came and knocked on our door and talked to my dad, and no traffic was allowed in or out, and we could not pull our cars out of the driveway for quite a while. Now, I am absolutely sure that didn't happen, because I was there the weekend afterward. I talked to the police. I had dinner with this family. I spoke repeatedly with the father of the two boys. No one mentioned any such thing. And I was trying to figure out where would these memories have come from, because the woman it's clear she was absolutely sincere. And then this morning, it struck me that in June of 1967, a little bit less than 3 years later, Glassboro entered the history books when President Lyndon Johnson and Soviet Premier Alexei Kosygin had a summit meeting there. And there must have been strict security.
And they would have closed roads.
Yes. So I think that is the answer. I didn't write this to you when we exchanged emails because it didn't occur to me until this morning. But I think this woman, and she says that other people she knows who remember it also, telescoped the two events.
It sounds perfectly reasonable to me, and reminds me of an interesting story. When I was at the University of after I graduated from the University of Iowa, I was assigned to the 442nd Tactical Airlift Wing in Kansas City, Missouri, for active duty. And then when I left the active duty, I was invited to join the wing, the reserve side of the house. So I had Air Force sticker on my car. Is the whole point of this. I had Air Force sticker on my car so I could drive in and out of base. And we went out to investigate some UFO sightings here in Iowa. And not long after that, there was a report on the radio about how the Air Force had been out to investigate this UFO landing in Story County, Iowa. And I am absolutely convinced somebody saw the sticker on the car. We were in, of course, civilian clothes, plain clothes, and they were just convinced that we were Air Force officers out there investigating this case. And, of course, it's not true. It was me as a private citizen out there. My car just happened to have a sticker to allow me on Richards Gebaur Air Force Base. So that's another way these things sort of get expanded, you might say.
Well, you wrote a fascinating piece for the International UFO Reporter. I don't remember the date, but I'm sure you remember it. It's called UFOs on Memory Lane.
Yes.
And that, I was utterly fascinated by what you did with that.
Well, that and for the listening audience who's not familiar with this, that is of course also on my blog at www.kevinrandle.blogspot.com, and thank you for that opportunity to plug the blog once again. But what happened, it was a couple had been out near Kepler Palisades State Park here in Iowa, and they had seen some UFOs floating down, they thought. And the story was, they had seen these star-like things in the distance. And pretty soon the woman involved in that was saying that, well, she saw a craft with a dome on it. And within 2 or 3 weeks, she was talking about having seen a dome and 2 occupants, humanoid-type shapes in this dome. And I talked to the guy, and he said, I don't know where she's getting that. All we saw were these lights kind of floating down. So I went out to the area where they had seen this thing and parked my car about dusk when they had seen these things going in. And I realized what they were looking at were the landing lights going into the Cedar Rapids Municipal Airport. And the thing was, with the wind blowing the other direction, you wouldn't hear that. And with their landing lights on, they did give the impression of floating down and disappearing into the trees. The police had investigated, and they said, well, there were no commercial flights into the airport at the time, but the thing is, it's general aviation was going in and out of it all the time. But I'd seen the exact same thing. So she, I think, had been so frightened by the experience that just seeing the lights in the distance wasn't enough, and she eventually saw in her mind, and she believed it to be the truth, a dome disk, and then these alien occupants behind the dome disk. So that's the story that you were referring to, the trip down memory lane.
Do you have any theory as to why her friend remembered it accurately, but she didn't?
I think it has to do with fright. I think it has to do with the whole thing. And the other interesting thing is nobody had really talked to him about it. She was being talked to by all kinds of UFO researchers and investigators and things like that. And nobody talked to him. And so I called him up, and he said, well, you're the first guy that that ever called me. And I had the drawings that they had made that night. I had the drawings she'd made a week or so later, and the drawings she made 2 or 3 weeks later. So I had it all. And I think the experience so frightened her that she had to, in her mind, create something that made it a little less frightening. And by seeing beings in the craft, it kind of mitigated the fright, I suppose. So that's my theory, and I don't know if that's accurate or not, but that's kind of what I thought. But it wasn't... It started out as just lights in the sky, and then it turned into a full-blown close encounter of the second kind, which means you see the craft close to the ground. I guess third kind because you see occupants. I don't know.
Yes.
But I'm surprised that you remember that.
Well, I mean, that article impressed me tremendously because I think that's near the crux of what we're dealing with when we're dealing with UFOs. I think that problem of memory, and you've written about this too, it has its fingerprints all over Roswell.
Oh, absolutely. There's real problems with the Roswell case because of the way information was gathered and because of the time that had passed between the events and when the investigations began. So I think that there was a lot of that, and I know that there's some confabulation going on, which is to say that witnesses would hear other witnesses' testimony, and they would kind of incorporate it into their own testimony. I think, her name escapes me, the woman who did the studies on memory and how you could subtly implant memories. And one of them, by asking the question, did you see the blue car? Implying there was a blue car there when there may not have been one. And then people say, well, we saw this blue car and that sort of thing. So we get a lot of that sort of thing going on. But I think that when we look at the whole of Roswell, there are some things that we can look at in the sense that they are documented in the newspaper, so we know what people did and how things went down, and there's some subtle documentation we can use to support some of this, and we have to incorporate all of that in the investigation, just not the spectacular pieces of testimony that people give us, but all these other avenues that become very interesting when we look at a case. We're going to have to take a quick break here again, believe it or not, and when we come back, I think we're going to talk about get away from Roswell and Glassboro if we can, and we'll talk a little bit about your book, Journal of a UFO Investigator. And as I say, you can take a look at his website and his blog at www.davidhalperin.net. And I'll post more information about this on my blog at www.kevinrandle.blogspot.com, and we will be back right after this.
Hi everyone, Rob McConnell here, and I wanted to spend a moment on internet streaming. Everybody has heard about internet streaming, but not many know much about it. Did you know the internet streams just about everything?
Movies.
From new releases to old classics.
TV shows.
Almost every show, every episode, and much more. But the question has always been, how do you do it? Well now, thanks to the folks at 123 Ready TV, I have the answer for you. They have developed a simple program app, 123 Ready TV, that you install on your Windows PC, Android smartphone, or Android tablet that can have you streaming like a pro in less than 5 minutes. You truly won't believe how much is available or how easy it is to do until you try. And for a one-time cost of only $19.99, this product is a real winner. To learn more about 123 Ready TV, visit our website at www.xzbn.net.
This is the X-Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X-Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, X-1, Dimension X, Space Patrol, and every minute of the X-Zone Broadcast Network by calling 213-401-0080, courtesy of Audio Now. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 213-401-0080 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember 213-401-0080 for the best of the paranormal, parapsychology, and sci-fi radio programming anywhere, 24/7, 365.
True healing must address 4 levels: physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual, for us to live joyful and productive lives. We tend to treat 3 of the 4, leaving the spiritual languishing. If you're tired of the same dysfunctional patterns cropping up in your life, Soul Balancing is for you. Trixie Phelps, owner and founder of Soul Balancing, is a naturally gifted energy healer trained in numerous esoteric forms, including shamanism. Trixie has created a powerful modality that safely and effectively clears your energetic field. A soul balancing session can remove interference, heal trauma, and restore your hope. Contact Trixie for a life-changing long-distance session today. www.soulbalancing.world. There's a legend shared by many indigenous cultures of a time when the nations were cast to the 4 corners of the world. Each nation was given a body of sacred knowledge that held a different portion of the truth to preserve. True reality could not be known until all the nations reunited, combining the information. If a single one was missing, the world could not be reborn and darkness would prevail. The Science of Magic Radio is dedicated to reuniting the sacred knowledge. With the understanding, none of us has all the answers, but together we can open new perceptions and possibilities. Through our combined vision, the world can be reborn into a place where darkness no longer prevails. Join me, Gwilda Wiyaka, and the Science of Magic daily on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, xzbn.net, or visit us at thescienceofmagic.net.
And for those of you keeping score at home, we are back once again. And I have to just mention one thing quickly. There's some interesting byplay that goes on between segments here. And this one has been a little bit weirder than most of them. And that was why we were talking about the naked truth. But we are really a different perspective. And I am here with David Halperin. He's the author of Journal of a UFO Investigator. And you can take a look at his blog at www.kevinrandle.blogspot.com. Try that again. www.davidhalperin.net would be his website and blog, not mine. When we left, we were talking a little bit about Roswell. I'm going to try to get away from that, even though I will mention that you can read the whole sordid tale of Roswell in my book, Roswell in the 21st Century, which I think looks at the problems with the testimony that we have, the problems with the lack of real documentation other than some newspaper accounts, the lack of any diaries or letters anybody wrote at the time, and how some of the story kind of evolved into the super space spectacular that it has become. And so if you're interested in Roswell, my take on it, which I think is pretty much closest to the truth, then that might be the book you want to take a look at if you've got a real interest in Roswell. So I know that we've kind of exhausted Glassboro. For those who haven't been paying attention, it is a hoax. It's obviously the Air Force was right and NICAP was wrong, and I think that's one of the things I'll explore at my blog when I put up the link to this program so that you can get a little bit more about what NICAP had to say about it. So I thought maybe we would go off into your novel, Journal of a UFO Investigator, which you said draws on your teenage dreams and fantasies as well as the UFO scene in the 1960s. So tell us a little bit about really kind of the UFO scene in the 1960s as you've incorporated it into the book.
Well, much of it is created by Gray Barker. And that Barker, I think, was the promoter of some of the legends that were the most powerful about the UFO.
Let's take a moment here and point out that Gray Barker was a UFO researcher, a UFO enthusiast. Back in the 1950s, he wrote a book called They Knew Too Much About Flying Saucers, and I think he might have introduced the idea of the Men in Black into the UFO scene. So he was quite a force in the UFO situation in the 1950s and early 1960s. So you were drawing on his work into your Journal of a UFO Investigator.
Yes, I mean, Albert Bender is a character. He never actually, and for those of your listeners who have not read Barker's book, Albert Bender was the Connecticut UFO researcher who in the fall of 1953 discovered the truth about the UFOs and was visited by 3 men in black who terrified him into silence.
So he never revealed what the truth about the flying saucers was?
No, never. Now, a few years ago, at least, he was still alive, which amazes me. He was in his 90s. And according to Jerry Clark, who I know has been on the program and who was an old friend of mine, that when people would ask Bender about what had happened to him back in 53, he would just be amazed that people were still interested, which suggests that whatever was going on there, it was no very explosive secret. But Barker turned it into this really haunting narrative of mysterious, sinister forces, and it came across just with tremendous plausibility. In any case, I was tremendously impressed by that as a kid. I think that was what got me sparked my interest in UFOs. And
it's interesting you say that, because I had kind of a similar experience with John Keel back in the 1960s, because I had written to him about the Men in Black, and he sent me a letter back and said, the phenomenon is reflective. The more interest you have in it, the more important it becomes, and it sort of grows out of that. So I thought that was an interesting comment, especially about the Men in Black. So,
yeah, I mean, I think Keel was onto something really important, and that is that the UFO phenomenon is not something out there. It's a part of us. And whether there's also something out there or not is an open question, but certainly the witness becomes part of the sighting.
I think also the investigator becomes part of the sighting as well, because I've investigated sightings and I have been called by documentary producers and said, we want to talk to you about blah, 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 whatever the sighting happens to be. And I say, but I'm not the story. The story is this person or that person. And they went, oh, we want to talk to you. So then the UFO investigator becomes the story as opposed to the witnesses being the story.
And then the debunker is part of the story.
Yes, because we have to have the other side of the picture, no matter how distorted the picture may be.
And the debunker is engaged with the UFO, no less than the investigator, no less than the witness. It's just there's a negative sign attached to the energy rather than a positive one.
And I found that interesting that the debunkers seem to get into this as deeply, if not deeper, than some of the UFO researchers. And I'm thinking, if you believe the phenomenon is unreal, if you believe there's nothing to it, and I think the phenomenon actually has multiple explanations, but if you think it's something unreal, why do you care what anybody else thinks about it? What motivates you to work so hard to debunk this phenomenon?
Exactly. And I think that is part of the UFO mystery. What is it that summons sometimes the most vehement reactions, not only from believers, but from debunkers? I mean, I saw a video clip a few months ago of Neil deGrasse Tyson discussing UFOs. And the man was twitching, gesticulating, bellowing. Clearly there was an immense emotional engagement with it.
Yes, and we don't like him because he demoted Pluto to a dwarf planet. Although I always thought of Pluto as a Mickey Mouse little planet, but that's a whole other story.
Yes, and I had a little stuffed Pluto I used to go to bed with when I was a child.
I was hoping you were going to say back when I was 50, I had a little stuffed Pluto.
I still have the little stuffed Pluto. I don't go to bed with him at the moment, but let's
drag it back to a Journal of a UFO Investigator.
Yes.
So you were fascinated by the Gray Barker tale and Albert Bender's his resignation from the field.
And another of Gray Barker's stories, which he promoted, was the Allende mystery, which we now know as the Philadelphia experiment.
Yeah, Carlos Allende, I think that's been pretty well debunked as well. And this gives me another opportunity for those who would like to know about it. Take a look at my blog and type in Allende or Carlos Allende in it, and you'll get a lot of information. I actually talked to one of the guys at the Office of Naval Research back in the 1960s. Who had reproduced the Allende letters in the Varro edition of the book with all the notations in it. And I say that to you because I know you know exactly what I'm talking about. The audience may be lost. Allende allegedly sent a copy of a book called The Case for the UFO, written by Morris K. Jessup, to the Office of Naval Research, and it had all these notations in it about UFOs and things like that. And the story was the Navy was interested in it and did an investigation. When I talked to Sidney Sherby, who was one of the guys at the Office of Naval Research when that came in, or Office of Naval Intelligence when that came in, he said, no, the Navy really didn't care, but we could do whatever we wanted with it as long as we didn't use Navy resources and do it on Navy time. So that's how the Varro manufactured book came out. And you can find that with the notations in it now online. And I did an article for it in a magazine, and Allende saw the article, and I have a copy of the article now with all his notations about how wrong I am in these places. But a fellow named Robert Gorman, and I've tried to get him on the program to talk about this specifically. Robert Gorman turned out he was doing an investigation of the Allende's case and discovered that Allende's parents, who really his last name was Allen, lived not that far from him. So he talked to them, and they told him, he had this habit of making this stuff up and being involved in all these things and writing notations on everything. You send him a birthday card, he'd write notations on it and send it back. But so it is a hoax. Yes, it is a hoax. So I digress, and I take the microphone away from you, and I hand it back to you. So you were talking about Carlos Allende.
Yeah, and it was I guess I would call it a hoax, but I'd rather call it a myth.
Okay.
And it's a myth that has the most incredible resonance that you can still, I don't know, there's thousands upon thousands of Google searches today for the Philadelphia experiment. I mean, that is not a bad accomplishment for a penniless drifter.
And the interesting thing is, Al Blalock, who claimed to have been part of the Philadelphia experiment in later incarnations, had actually stayed with Brad Steiger a number of times, and we're hoping to get Brad Steiger on the program to talk about these sorts of things. And Brad Steiger said that unfortunately he came to realize, even though it was a fascinating story, he was a fascinating guy, it just simply wasn't true.
But the truth is that the story is fascinating, and we said why. And when go back to the early 60s, that, remember, I didn't know any of these things. I really thought those annotations had been written by 3 mysterious gypsies. And that was the mindset that I was going back in to Journal of a UFO and Journal of a UFO Investigator.
Do you relate these stories in some detail in the book?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah. The story of Journal of a UFO Investigator is fundamentally autobiographical. A teenage boy whose mother is slowly dying, and who becomes persuaded that UFOs are real, and who constructs a world for himself from the materials of the UFO mythology as it existed in the early 60s. With one difference, I cheated. I put Roswell in. And you know as well as I do that nobody in the 60s would even have heard of Roswell. But
well,
it was
actually,
very important for me to do that.
Actually, Frank Edwards, in his book Flying Saucer Serious Business, which came out, I think, 65 or 66, actually does mention Roswell.
Yeah, I think, yeah.
And he gets everything
you're
wrong.
Right.
He gets everything wrong, other than there was a crash, and it was in Roswell. But he gets everything else wrong. So.
But I included the bodies found, which nobody had even heard of then, or at least most of us ufologists. But it was very important for me because my aim was to try to tell the story of how a lonely boy coping with an unspeakable reality creates for himself a world built out of these elements. Now, in doing that, I mentioned when I sent you the email, I mentioned dreams. When I remember this clearly. Okay, we know that.
Well, let me break in here before we get off on this tangent, because we're gonna have to take our final break here. We'll come back and talk about the dreams. You can find the book if you want to. Viking Press, Journal of a UFO Investigator. Take a look at the blog, www.davidhalperin.net. And I will put up more information about this at www.kevinrandle.blogspot.com. We will return right after this with more of a different perspective.
This is the X-Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X-Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, X-1, Dimension X, Space Patrol, and every minute of the X-Zone Broadcast Network by calling 213-401-0909 courtesy of Audio Now. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 213-401-0080 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember 213-401-0080 for the best of the paranormal, parapsychology, and sci-fi radio programming anywhere, 24/7, 365.
I am Dr. Carl O'Helvey, founder, president of a new cancer foundation focusing on evidence-based physical, mental, and spiritual interventions, including natural cancer cures, prayer, meditation, affirmations, nutrition, and other related holistic cancer prevention and cure modalities. These are used in cancer education, research, and financing care. I ask for your help to continue this important work by donating at www.holisticcancerfoundation.com.
Wouldn't you love to know the secret to everything? I'm Dr. Kimberly McGeorge, and on The Secret to Everything, we will merge the practical with open investigation into all realms of the mysterious. We will talk to cutting-edge alternative health practitioners, those who inspire and motivate you in business and life, and of course, we will share stories of the paranormal, conspiracy, and cryptozoology. You will transform because of the frequency I carry, the frequencies my guests carry. Life may never be the same after you listen to this program, for the secret to everything is for you, the listener, for those who desire more in every area of their lives and believe that it can still be found. Listen and discover thesecrettoeverything.com.
Little children aren't the only ones afraid of the dark. Millions of soldiers return from war zones with PTSD, anger, frustration, fear, and loneliness, much of which surfaces during the darkness of the night. You have the chance to change the lives of these American heroes. Songs and Stories for Soldiers.us provides free MP3 players for these men and women. With a list of 3 million songs in 16 different styles, 100,000 audiobooks, and 30,000 old-time radio programs, every veteran can find something to soothe and comfort them at no cost. All our players contain an 8-hour audio program designed to help veterans fall asleep. With 1,500 plus vets now participating, it's our goal to deliver 10,000 audio players this year. Go to our website at songsandstoriesforsoldiers.us. Help us help a veteran make it through the night.
And we have returned to a different perspective. I am the host, Kevin Randle. And if you're interested in these sorts of topics, take a look at xzbn.net or take a look at the X-Zone Broadcast Network website, and you can listen to other programs by other hosts and more of a different perspective as well. I am joined once again with David Halperin, whose blog, you can find his blog at www.davidhalperin.net. There's a lot of good information that you can find on his website. We were talking about a journal of a UFO investigator, and he was talking about his teenage dreams, and when I had to break in and take a break, so we will start from that. You were going to say about dreams.
Yes, I remember this from when I was about 14 or 15, that I dreamed that I was at a big rambling house out in the country for a meeting for a group of select teenagers like myself who were interested in exploring the edges of science. And I remembered there was a boy with fairly close-cropped blonde hair wearing a jacket and a tie, as I was, and there was a beautiful blonde in an evening dress. And then I woke up. That was my dream. when I wrote Journal of a UFO Investigator, I asked, well, what would have happened if I hadn't woken up? And the story unspools from there. That the girl whose the hero is named Danny. He's a boy, I think he's 13 or 14. The girl is a little bit older and incomparably more experienced. She's actually quite an accomplished seductress and thief. And she gets Danny to agree to come down to Florida to try to so they can break into Morris K. Jessup's old house.
And Morris K. Jessup was the writer of The Case for the UFO, which relates back to the Allende letters.
Right. To see if they can find the annotated book, the annotated copy of The Case of the UFO. That Rochelle tells Danny how she was there when they found Jessup's body in the car in the park in Coral Gables.
And we have to point out Morris K. Jessup allegedly committed suicide, I think in 1959, by running a hose from the tailpipe of his car into the passenger compartment.
And Rochelle's sometime boyfriend, Tom, who's the boy with the close cropped hair, points out that he committed suicide. Rochelle says, no, he did not commit suicide. He was murdered. And she gets Danny to come down to Florida to help her find the book.
So is the book mainly about the Allende letters and the things associated with it, or does it go off into other ufological tangents?
Yes, it goes off into lots of ufological stuff, but the thread is Danny and what this means to him, because we are reminded periodically that Danny is coming up with this story in order not to know that his mother is dying.
And what are some of the other ufological cases you touch on?
Well, let's take it that he shows up, he drives down with an older boy who's a mentor. They drive down to Miami, and the older boy leaves him in the Miami airport to meet Rochelle, who's coming in from New Mexico. And she doesn't show up. And as he's waiting for her, that her flight empties, she's not there, and he hears an announcement, Albert Bender, meet your party at the baggage claim. Albert Bender, meet your party at the baggage claim. And of course, Albert Bender is the man who was silenced by the three men in black. Danny goes down to the baggage claim, and there he first notices, but doesn't pay too much attention, to two men, there are two men, the third shows up later, who are clearing away some of the unclaimed suitcases wearing black uniforms.
So we've got the men in black in this thing as well.
We got the men in black, and then when Danny finds a suitcase with Rochelle's name on it, tries to walk off with it, the two men accost him. What are you doing with that suitcase? And they take him to an office where there's a third man and wearing the same uniform, go through the suitcase, and they find all sorts of receipts inside the suitcase for motels and for rent-a-car from Albuquerque and from Roswell. So we've got that there too.
So we've sucked Roswell into the 1960s, is what you're saying.
We've sucked Roswell into the 1960s, and I won't tell you what happens after that.
Because you would like people to go out and buy the book.
Well, I'm afraid it is no longer in print.
Is it available on Amazon?
It is available on Amazon. And at this point, I would very much like people to read the book. and to get in touch with me through my website when they read it and let me know what they think about it.
And that would be www.davidhalperin.net for those of you who have not been paying attention about that. So in the book, you've incorporated some ufological history and ufological mythology, so you can get sort of a background on what was some of the early stuff going on in the UFO field.
I think you can get a feel for it. I mean, it's not... I've not tried for strict historical accuracy. I mean, that the book treats it, that in the novel, I treat it as if those three gypsies actually existed, and that they have some relation to the three men in black. Now, you and I know that they never existed, that Carl Allen, for some reason that I've never been able to understand, wrote his annotations in three different handwritings and three different colors of ink. I mean, which is a difficult trick to do, but I think the man was a genius.
Well, he often took credit for writing the book with Morris K. Jessup. So he would talk about the book he wrote with Jessup, which is his annotations in the book. And just to be clear for people to understand, Morris K. Jessup did write a book. He did believe in UFOs. The book did go to the Office of Naval Research, I guess, and was looked at by two officers in the Navy, but the Navy itself didn't care about the book. And now in 2017, we realized that it was a hoax. One of the things he talked about was this disappearance of an aircraft in the Andes in 1947, 1948, the Stardust, I believe, was the name of the aircraft, and it was very mysterious. They were supposedly within sight of the airport in Santiago, Chile, and supposedly disappeared. Many, many years later, I think around 2000, and again, this is on my blog, so you can take a look at it to get all the details. They found the remains of the aircraft, and they had flown into a mountain. They had assumed they were close to Santiago. They had sent them messages over the radio that they were close to Santiago, and then they crashed into a mountain. The aircraft has been found, it's been identified, and the bodies have been recovered. So we know that part of the story, the annotations in the book, are untrue. Because we know what happened to the airplane.
Yes, it's clear now that there were no great mysteries to be revealed. I mean, I'm going to insert a plug now for my own blog, the davidhalperin.net. That a few years ago, I put up a whole series of posts on the Philadelphia experiment that I had spent a week reading the Barker-Allen correspondence in the Gray Barker collection at Clarksburg, West Virginia. And I found out all sorts of stuff about Allen as a human being. And I mean, Robert Gurman certainly pegged it perfectly. The one thing, by the way, I did not know was that Allen in his old age was happy in his last years.
Well, that's good. Well, we're going to have to break it off here, even though this is fascinating. I've enjoyed this conversation more than I've joined some of them in the past. Let me thank you for coming on the program.
Well, thank you for having me.
The book is a Journal of a UFO Investigator. You can find more about it at www.davidhalperin.net and more of it on my blog at www.kevinrandle.blogspot.com. I wanted to take a moment here because something happened today that I wanted to talk about, and that was I was watching a program and I saw a preview for a time travel adventure on Fox Network. I don't know what the name of the program is. I just caught a little bit of it. But it struck me there are 3 time travel programs on network television now. There's Timeless on NBC. There is Time After Time on ABC. And now this thing coming up on Fox. And I've been fascinated by time travel. And I've often wondered if time travel isn't the explanation for the some of the UFO events. And I wanted to bring that up simply because I had done a science fiction novel, and I started it in college, called On the Second Tuesday of Next Week. And it's a time travel story about what happens when alien invaders come into the solar system, and we have a big battle out in space by Pluto, by the way, and how people keep going back and forth, changing the events so that they can come out the victors in this great battle in space. So I thought I'd just mention that you might want to take a look at on the second Tuesday of next week, which you can find as an ebook on Amazon.com. We will be back next week with Lauren Hunter, who is a Minnesota ufologist, and talking to her. And you can find more information about what we've talked about today at www.kevinrandle.blogspot.com. And we will be back after our 167-hour hiatus next week.